Okay, looks like we are live. We're going to go ahead and do just a quick video. It's easier for me to do videos than it is for me to try and talk over typing. I get a little bit caught up on grammar and I want to say certain things and I want certain things to be involved in it. And so it gets a little bit difficult. Now, I am doing the double screen again, double recording. Again, one's personal so that I can keep track of things and hopefully it won't ever get lost. And then the other one is more professional. It's for my school project and things like that. So that's why you'll see me bouncing back and forth as if I'm having a conversation between two different people, because technically I am. I'm having a conversation with all of my YouTube followers and myself, and then I'm having a conversation with my school professionals. So, today, what I'm going to talk about is a response to a module post that we had today. And in that post, we were supposed to read a couple resources, I guess would be the best way to say it. A couple resources. We were supposed to read them, and they help childcare professionals be able to include children more effectively when they are working with them. And so one of the things that really stood out to me in one of the articles, it was, let me go ahead and just read the bullet point to you. It says, children are active learners from birth, constantly taking in and organizing information to create meaning through their relationships, their interactions with their environment, and their overall experiences. Now, this was something that was really cool. And as I read through it, I couldn't help but agree, right? Because in my personal experience, by the time a child has gotten to that elementary age, they have more or less decided or have adopted a personality, right? And at that point, it's up to educational professionals to continue to perpetuate the personality traits that are positive in that child, encourage them to move forward and be the person that they really want to be. It's not up to the educational professional to mold them into the person the educational professional wants them to be, but to help guide the child to become the person the child wants to be, who the child's meant to be, because they have innate traits that are given to them through genetics from parents and grandparents and so on and so on, things that will inevitably be a part of their lives. And it's something that they won't be able to change and you won't be able to change. For instance, myself, I have a personal issue, if you will, a special need, if you will, a mental disability, if you will. I'm type 2 bipolar. And so I've got a condition that I can't do anything to change, and it's a part of my life. I can manage it, but I can't take it away. It's not going anywhere. So no matter how much an educational professional tries to change that aspect of me, having, personality differences, having my mentality shift from hot to cold, happy, sad, all of those things, you can't change that. I'm sorry. So no matter what you do or how you try to uh, move me in a direction, or if you will, force me to become the type of child that you want me to be, the more resistance you're going to get, the more problems it's going to cause for me, the more problems it's going to cause for you, and it's just going to create an issue. And so really it's up to the educational professional to allow the child to learn the way that the child wants to learn. Now, I'm going to read this very last part of this, because this is what's extremely important, and this is what I wanted to share with my personal experience. All right, so this very last part of this bullet point, this very last sentence says, educators must also recognize that their nonverbal signals may influence children's attitudes towards their peers. For example, one recent study found that children who will think a child who receives more positive nonverbal signals from a teacher is perceived as better or smarter when it comes to reading than a child who receives more negative nonverbal signals, regardless of that child's actual reading level. Now, that's super important. And I'm going to share a story, something that I haven't shared with very many people in my life at all. And I actually shared this story here while on this internship because of the things that certain professionals that I dealt with here were doing and saying. And it's the story of my very first suicide attempt. And I know that that's a serious topic, and that's not something that people want to talk about. It's not something that people really want to dive into. But for me, it was important because at the time we were talking about suicide prevention. So sharing my story I felt was applicable. So I'm going to share it real quick here with you guys as well. So when I was in third grade, um, I started to struggle. And first and second grade, I did amazing. I was the top performer in the class, best at math, best at spelling, best at reading. I was really best at everything, best athletically. But all of those, bonuses and things like that of me being as good as I was, they kind of developed inside of myself a little bit of an ego, I guess you might call it. I really thought that I was just that good. And so when I went into third grade, things changed. We started to do multiplication, we started to do division, which isn't difficult for me. But the way that we started to do things was by strict memorization. Right? You learn your times tables, blah, 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 blah means blah, 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 blah means blah, 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 blah. And that's not the way that I learn. I don't learn by doing the exact same thing over and over again through repetition like a factory line. That's not how I do things. I'm a very kinesthetic learner. And so I recognize by putting my hands on and by recognizing patterns and putting patterns together. So third grade, I started to struggle and I started to act out a little bit. My home life was terrible, absolutely terrible. If you like to consider, or if you need a reference, consider Cinderella and Harry Potter together. That was me. Cinderella and Harry Potter. That was my life. I was the stepchild. I wasn't allowed to do things. I was blamed for everything. I was always grounded, always in trouble. It was always my fault. I had to do chores more than everyone else. I got treated worse than everyone else. I had to sleep in a smaller room than everyone else. I mean, literally, Harry Potter, Cinderella, that was my life. And so at school, I used that as an outlet. And at this time, when I started to struggle with my education, the professional that I was working with, the teacher that I was working with, she really didn't do a good job at encouraging me at what I needed. She just got frustrated and upset because she was dealing with other kids. So what she did is she actually put me into a program for readers who are terrible or bad readers, basically. The program was called RIP, RIP, and I don't know exactly what that meant, but I do know that I was inside of this class at certain times of the day. And this class was comprised of kids with severe special needs, Down syndrome, things like that. And I was put into this class as a normal child. I, of course, hadn't been diagnosed with any issues, ADD, PTSD, bipolar, none of that stuff. I hadn't been diagnosed with any of it. But I was put into this class with these other kids with special needs. And over time, I was ridiculed by the teacher, my personal teacher, not the one in the classroom, not the RIP place, not the reading place, but my regular teacher she would constantly berate me in front of the other kids. She'd tell me that I was stupid and all sorts of things. She would just break me down. And it was really, really hard for me to deal with that. And so she put me into this place for these readers with special needs. And eventually she started to mock and ridicule me for that. And then the other kids started to mock and ridicule me for not being a good reader, which I was a great reader at the time. I just couldn't focus enough. I didn't want to sit still and read for you. I would rather do other things that were more interesting or exciting that captured my attention. So instead of redirecting or guiding me, she just tossed me out of the classroom, put me in here, and then all the other kids started to call me a retard and started to make fun of me. She herself started to participate in it. And so I wanted to build off of this one sentence where it says your nonverbal and even your verbal cues will set a tone for your other students, right? And it did 100% for this teacher. She set a tone and she villainized me and she made me the bad guy for her entire classroom. And that spread to the entire class, like the third grade class, all of the different classrooms, eventually spread to the other teachers and educational professionals in the school. I was ostracized, more or less, and it was absolutely terrible. It was so hard for me to deal with that at that summer, after my third grade year, just the prospect of coming back to school dealing with the ridicule, dealing with the teacher, dealing with all of that frustration. It terrified me to the point where sorry. I hated my life so much at school I didn't want to go, and I hated my life so much at home I didn't want to be there, so I tried to kill myself. It was a pretty lackluster attempt. I more wanted attention than anything, but in reality, I did want my life to end also. And so I attempted very elaborately to drown myself in my bathtub. It was hard. It was hard. I failed. I failed at killing myself, and I actually took that quite hard as well. I took it as I was a failure. Couldn't even kill myself. It wasn't good enough. Anyway, I ended up going to school again, 4th grade, and I got really fortunate. I was put into my favorite teacher of all time. I was put into her class. Her name was Mrs. Oakes. She's my 4th grade elementary teacher. She took a boy who hated life enough that he tried to kill himself. She took a boy that was labeled as a criminal, as a deviant, as a retard, just a bad kid. She took that kid into her class and she treated him normal. That's all she did. She didn't treat me special. She didn't take me under her wing. She didn't give me anything extra. She just treated me like a normal child. She listened to me. And when I would talk to her, she would respond back to me. We actually had conversations back and forth. It was the first time in my life I'd ever had real, true intellectual conversation, especially with an adult. And she taught me so many things. But ultimately, she saved my life. And she didn't do anything special. I need you to understand that. She just treated me normal. For the first time in my life, I wasn't treated exceptional, like I was some Mozart, some savant of some kind, because I was doing so good in 1st and 2nd grade. I was the best in the class at everything. And then all of a sudden, I went from this high elevated pedestal to just being brought down to you're a retard, you're worthless, you're just a criminal, you're a terrible kid, nobody likes you. And then from that being brought up to, yeah, you're just like the rest of us. Come and be like us. Come play with us. That's all she did. And it changed my life forever. So I need to bring this all back around. I'm going to read this sentence again. Educators must also recognize that their nonverbal signals influence children's attitude towards their peers. For example, one recent study found that children who think a child who receives more positive nonverbal signals from a teacher is perceived as a better or smarter reader than a child who receives more negative nonverbal signals, regardless of that child's actual reading performance. So even if a child is completely normal and able to participate with the rest of their friends, if you treat them in a different way, if you say things and do things to them differently, the children will catch on and they will follow. They will learn that behavior, and you will inadvertently guide those children to become little persecutors themselves. And they are not going to understand the damage that they can do because they're just kids. But you, as an adult, you can start that. You can create the environment that could lead an 8-year-old child to try to take their own life. You could be that person, but you could also be the person by just doing the normal thing that could save a 9-year-old child's life. I'm sorry. It's a big deal to me. Now, I told that story here. I haven't told that story to anyone except for very few people. And I decided to tell that story here on the internship in a public place with a bunch of educators. I also told the other two stories of my suicides, but we'll get to that later. Because I thought it was that important. It's that important to share that you make an impact. Even if you don't think that you do, you make a huge impact. So please take it seriously. Please be real about it. Don't think that it's just normal, that you can just slide by, that you can just, roll your eyes, sigh, shrug your shoulders, wince, and make faces. Kids pick up on it. And if you don't have the energy to be normal to somebody, right, then step away because you don't want to be the person that brings that child down. Now, I told you the name of my favorite teacher that saved my life the first time, Ms. Oakes. But I sure as hell remember the name of the teacher that nearly took my life. I remember what she used to say, what she used to do. It's burned into my life. I'll never speak her name because she probably doesn't even realize the impact that she made on me. But I remember her name. And kids will remember your name if you fail to put forth at least enough effort to not be the one to bring them down. If you can't be the one to save their life and bring them up, then please, by God, don't be the one that drags them down. Don't be the one. And that's all I've got for you. I hope you guys have a great Monday. Oh my gosh, I didn't even record that.